Hello everyone. Before we start today's video, if you could all do me a solid and lightly tap the like button, perhaps share the video about and leave a comment. If you are not subscribed, subscribe as well. It would greatly help this channel. Thank you very much. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Captain's log, subdates 221024.5. The plan from the rest of the crew is shit, so I've decided our new prime directive of No Lives Matter, totally original, will now have to wait until New Year, mostly because Korn said he was too busy fisting Slanesh's urethra. Last week I made a video titled Just Stop Oil Deface Van Gogh, whatever his name is, Vincent, let's call him Vincent, where two privileged middle-class idiots went and threw tomato soup over one of his works. It understandably drew a lot of attention. There was a second part to that video because the Dartford crossing had been, well, co-opted, I guess? Yeah. Where some dipshit had climbed up the bridge, yes, in protest because while it was raining, he was worried about the world burning. Based on the rainfall that day, and most of this week in fact, I don't think he has a problem with the world burning. And if there is any fires going on, it's mostly California, and we're all okay with it. Even people in California don't mind it. This week, we're skipping town because last week's did really well, and I think I'm going to piggyback off that success. We're going to go to Germany, where another eco-mob targets another masterpiece. The artist in question is Claude Monet, and the work in question had sold in 2019 for $110 million. The piece in question was being displayed at Potsdam's Barberini Museum, and much like the first one, last week's that is, where the two girls threw the soup and then rubbed glue and yeah, these people did exactly the same, but it wasn't glue. The applicator this time was Bodger and Badger's finest mashed potato, and we do in fact, much like last week's, have a video for it. This group is not just Stop Oil. They're called, when you translate it, Last Generation. And what fascinates me is, they strolled up to that painting, standing out like a sore thumb, props and all. High-vis jackets, they were very much obvious. Yet nobody thought, should we stop them? Should we perhaps, I don't know, see if they're alright, if they'd like a cuddle, maybe a chai latte with almond milk. The artwork in question, because I'm going to play the clip in a second, is called Les Mules. It is a rather beautiful piece and looked a lot nicer without the mashed potato on it. So by all means, enjoy the video and, well, we'll get to some criticisms after.
Hallo. Wo wollen Sie kommen?
Menschen hungern, Menschen frieren, Menschen sterben. Wir sind in einer Klimakatastrophe. Und alles, wovor ihr Angst habt, sind Tomatensuppe oder Kartoffelbrei in einem Gemälde.
I now have to interject for the sake of fair use to point out one glaringly obvious problem here. First, no one reacted. Second, there are barely any people there. And third, could you possibly put your hand in a more comfortable position so at least the long game can be considered? Or maybe consider a slightly more powerful applicator? Is that the word again? Solvent, that's the word. Might I recommend epoxy resin, although it does warm up a little and takes a little while longer, so some body armor might be useful as well. Or, if you're really feeling creative, I hear concrete can be quick dry in 5 minutes from a bag. They use fence posts for it usually.
Wisst ihr, wovor ich Angst habe? Davor, dass die Wissenschaft sagt, dass wir 2050 unsere Familien nicht werden ernähren können. Braucht es Kartoffelbrei auf einem Gemälde, damit ihr zuhört? Dieses Gemälde wird nichts mehr wert sein, wenn wir uns um Essen streiten müssen. Wann ist der Punkt erreicht, an dem ihr hinhört? Wann ist der Punkt erreicht, an dem ihr hinhört und nicht einfach so weitermachen?
So much like with the tomato soup being thrown onto the painting of sunflowers by Vincent, and the privileged white posh girls speaking, I have some bones of contention with everything said by these rather delightful individuals. Firstly, people are starving, people are hungry, people are struggling. There has never been a version of this world where that has ever not been the case. You have stated the blindingly obvious, and then pointed out that science tells us in 2050 food is going to be scarce. At that point, the human population will be close to 10 billion, and will be, as science believes, going down. Birth rates are struggling in some places. It has been well known for a while. If resources are being stretched further, climate isn't the only issue. It is also the continually growing populations that then in turn struggle to feed their own people with the resources they have from the land that they grow on. The United Kingdom is no exception here. We import vast amounts of food because we can't grow enough to feed the 65 to 70 million that live here, and we have more people coming here every single day. We're not as fortunate as America, where they have close to 350 million, and they have so much land. They're able to export so much food. The next point I want to make is another bone of contention. You seem to be dealing in absolutes. You can appreciate art, but if you do that, you can't really be taking the climate problem seriously, and the lack of food that we've now wasted some of, unironically, to get our point across. As I stated last week, this is not a case of absolutes. It is not a case that one can exist and the other cannot. Remove the art and you still have people hungry. There will always be hungry people, struggling people, starving people. I don't like saying that, but that has always been the case and will always be the case going forward. Another thing, that painting was owned by somebody who paid a lot of money for it, meaning it is private property. I have been led to believe that a number of these paintings have a very thin glass shield on them, but I don't know if that is the case with the painting you have defiled. I really don't. I'm only going by the vast number of comments I got last week telling me this. Not that it changes the fact that you still think you're getting your message across. Because what I'm seeing is, you're wasting good soup that deserved croutons and my mouth, and you're taking crap, I assume, instant mash, which I'll argue is not real food anyway, but to somebody it could be real food, and using it to drive home another point, because apparently the world is not allowed to have beauty or history, and that cannot in turn be appreciated, which means in turn we cannot allow this to exist while people are still hungry. Only when the world is no longer hungry can we have this back. But since we need function and purpose, you can't have appreciation. I didn't realize we were about to start a war between the Assassins and the Templars. At time of recording, there have been 23 consecutive days of protest by the eco-terrorist group Just Stop Oil. More recently, and around the same time of this Monet being defiled, we had Just Stop protesters on the famous Abbey Road crossing, striking the same pose as that of the Beatles. I had assumed they glued their feet to the floor based on how flat they were, and one of them being barefooted. If I was in one of those cars, one of them would, well, their feet would still be there. And before I forget, last week's Phoebe Plummer and Anna Holland, who threw the soup on the Vincent painting, pled not guilty to criminal damage. Their trial is set for December the 13th at the City of London Magistrates Court. You were seen doing it. I think it's fairly obvious you did. Now, I know what the UK courts are like, very Mickey Mouse in nature, therefore you can rightly assume they'll just get a slap on the wrist and a suspended sentence because their mother and fathers will undoubtedly have paid someone well to look after them, because they're privileged white kids, what do you expect? There's also an accusation coming out though, an accusation that many of these protesters are paid protesters. Now that fascinates me, this concept that somebody will go into Madame Tussauds, walk up to King Charles's statue and deface it with cake. A man who is known for being very environmental. In a good way? Yeah. King Charles, well, one time, at least once, did screw up. He went to New York to accept an environmentalist award. He flew there in a private jet. It doesn't set the right standard, but he has over recent years done that. But Just Stop Oil have decided, we're gonna do more, and we're gonna go to the king. Now, it's a wax thing. At least you could have done was had the balls to go up to Norfolk and go do it to him in person. Although saying that, it is unlikely you would have gotten within 100 paces of him before being blitzkrieged by his security. Now back to the idea of being paid to be one of these protesters. This seems quite strange to me, but you know what? I can't hate the player for their hustle. It's just a very odd thing to know you are monetarily compensated for inconveniencing many people who themselves are trying to get to work. You're paid to disrupt their lives. The very lives that then pay for the food they put on their tables. which you also claim is running out or will run out in 2050. It has also emerged that some climate activists are at odds over what actions protesters should take to get the public's attention, with some leaders urging their demonstrators to upset people and others calling for a more moderate approach. I would argue the more moderate would be a better way forward, akin to that of a door-knocking Jehovah's Witness, okay? At least then I can shut the door and you can sod off. But I'll be polite about it. Extinction Rebellion has urged the group on attracting new members instead of flashy demonstrations because it turns out radical actions, well, they pose significant barriers when recruiting new activists to join the cause because, whoa, big surprise everyone, no one wants to be involved with somebody who has the most horrific optics you could ever come across. Try to imagine my shock. Now, with all these different types of environmentalist groups, you have a problem. Each one has their own methods for how to go forward. Each one has their own ways for raising funds to get their message across. When you have so many different groups using so many different types of tactics, all run the same risk of being tarred with a brush from the other group. So if you are considered more moderate, chances are you are drowned out by a vocal minority, as has often been the case. You might even have more members, but if you are the quietest, you're not going to make as much of a change as you would like to. That is not in any way an endorsement for those who use these petulant and barbaric actions to get their points across. And I'm still chuckling at the idea a guy actually climbed the Dartford Bridge and used a hammock to sleep. Another thing I find fascinating is if some of these people are being paid to do this, surely they should claim expenses and buy better quality produce to throw at paintings. Also, why does it have to be food? If you're so desperate to take the art away from people, why aren't you using the very solvents you use on your hands? Clearly, you aren't as invested as you claim, and your symbolic gesture is weak tea compared to the damage you actually could do, especially considering the remarkably slow reaction times of anyone involved in security. As far as the German protesters go, I don't actually have an update for you, not yet. But if we do another one of these at another museum, I will be sure to find it and present it.